Greetings, I am Gresham's at all, and welcome back to Gresham Reads Monster Blood Tattoo, Book 1, Foundling, by D.M. Cornish. So in the previous chapter, Europe and Rossamünd were brought into the Harefoot Dig, and were being cared for by what did he describe himself as? Where is it? Let's see. The proprietor. Right. The proprietor, a Mr. Bilitus. However, the next morning after being allowed to stay in and paying for the night, the wife of the proprietor, who is apparently the owner, and quite an elitist, it seems, had barged in and demanded that they be removed, and at the very most, if they were allowed to stay, be sent towards, I believe it was, maid's quarters. However, upon the argument that was beginning to ensue, Europe had awoken, and interrupted. Excuse me. Sorry, I've just eaten, so a little bit gassy at the moment. But either way, Europe had awoken and had apparently some stern words for the Madame before the chapter ended. So let us see what comes about of this, shall we? So as per usual, we have the definition before the chapter begins. This one is Skold, which is a noun. The term for a teratologist who does the work of fighting monsters using chemicals and potions known as potives. They throw these potives by hand, pour them from bottles, fling them with a sling or fustaball, a sling on a stick, fire them from pistols known as salinumbus or salt cellars, set traps, make smoke, or whatever else it takes to defeat and destroy a monster. They typically wear flowering robes and some kind of conical hat to signify their trade. Interesting. And we had met a Skold. I believe her name was Sallow? Let me see if I can find the name. No, Gretel. Her name is Gretel. Okay, I see. But either way, I was curious if it was Sallow, because in the page literally right next to the start of the chapter, there was an image of a woman known as Sallow. A sketch, and she appears to have a somewhat conical hat with a tube of some sort being held in her hands just out of view, but it's kind of peeking into the bottom of the portrait. But either way, let us begin, shall we? with Chapter 11, What the Physician Ordered. Madame Felicitine did not appear to know how to answer such cool and obstinate certainty as she found in Europe. Suddenly rendered powerless in her own way house, she quit the room with a great shower of tears and a great show of wailing. Mumbling incoherent apologies, Bilitis hurried after her, closing the dark door as he left. Gretel and the Skold. Oh, okay, so Gretel is the one who brought the Skold, so the Skold must be named Sallow. Okay, so I did have it right. It was just... she wasn't named, I guess. And Gretel was the maid who brought her. Gretel and the Skold looked at each other awkwardly, and then the bower maid busied herself by moving about the room, lighting candles against the growing dark. Dr. Verhoeven stood and stared at the floor impassively. The Skold looked from him to the bed and back, then behind her at the door. I am sorry if I have done something to offend Dr. Hooverhoven, she offered, appearing truly troubled. This roused the good physician. Not at all, girl. You were only answering to my call, and fair enough at that. Let us think no more of what has just passed. This lady needs your aid. A look of great relief lit up her face. I wonder if this Skold fancies the doctor. Certainly appears that way, or at the very least she is a very timid woman. Absolutely, yes, let's. You know I'll always help as best I can. And a great commendation it is to you too, my dear. The physician smiled grimly. Rossamünd was at Europe's bedside in a dash, full of hopeful concern. She looked at him placidly, her red eyes ghastly within the oval of her sickly face. Hello, little man. Have I been away for long? Since last night, very early this morning. Rossamünd's voice quavered slightly in his eagerness. The Fulgar closed her eyes. So, we made it to the way house then. Am I all delirium, or are my senses turning hard rocks and sharp pine cones into a soft, warm bed? Aye, we made it here, ma'am, and the kind people helped us. Europe chuckled weakly. I'm sure they did, except maybe that screeching woman. Tell me now, how much does this help cost? The boy's face fell. He had not thought of it quite like that, that they were ready with assistance only as he was ready to pay. 12 sequins for 2 nights. Her chuckle grew louder, but that stopped with a soft gasp. And you paid from my purse? No, ma'am. Rossamünd puffed his chest just a little. I paid with the Emperor's billion, which was given to me to start work as a lamplighter. An Emperor's man, are we? Good for you. How interesting. She seemed to fade for a moment, then shuddered. I am sick, Rossamünd. I must have my treacle, and very soon. You'll have to make it for me again. While they had talked so, Dr. Verhoeven stood by, rocking on his heels once more. Now he came in quickly, and you shall have it, madam. Here I am, the local physician, Dr. Verhoeven. How do you do? And here is the delightful Miss Sallow, our own Skold, who can make your plaudimentum. Am I right, dear? The physician turned his attention to the Skold, who stepped forward, obviously in awe of the Fulgar now invalid in the bed before her. Why, yes, I know all the kinds of drafts needed by Lazars. A good Skold always does. The Fulgar turned her mizzled attention to them both and squinted. Ah, Mr. Physician, you got me a Skold. How kind. Such tender mercies. I thank you. However, the boy could have made it for me, sir. He's much cleverer than he looks. Ducking his head, Rossamünd did not know whether to be pleased or offended. I'm sure he is, and more, dear lady. But I would prefer to trust to my own methods, and know it is done as well as I know it can be done. Dr. Verhoeven nodded his head in agreement with his own statement. However you want it, I'll not argue with a man of physics. As it should be, madame. He smiled ingratiatingly. I shall recommend a sporific be brought to you as well, to help you sleep. Take both this and the plaudimentum, and then heal with the most ancient of cures. Rest. Europe closed her eyes, a knowing grin upon her lips. And tell me, dear doctor, at what price does your warm concern come? Rossamünd could not be certain, but it seemed that Dr. Verhoeven actually blushed. You do me a disservice, madame. I seek to help you purely for the satisfaction of knowing another human creature is strolling easy once more upon the path of health. Certainly you do, sir. Europe softly sighed. And what will be the account waiting for me upon my departure? We all have to put food in our stomachs and clothes on our back. I'll not begrudge you your pay. 2 sequins pay for it all. The physician relented. Europe raised an eyebrow. Rossamünd thought her still very sharp and feisty for one so ill. Dr. Verhoeven quickly went on. But enough of this unflattering talk of physical things. You must be easy now, and have your draught when it's done. Rossamünd found that disturbing black lacquer case, the treacle box poking from a saddlebag at the bottom of the cupboard. Once again, it gave him dread chills as he fetched it out. He took it over to Europe, who roused herself and smiled weakly. She looked to Salo, who blushed brightly from ear to ear. Let this little man help you, Skold. I trust him. The Fulgar gave Rossamünd a strange and haunted look. He's my new factotum, she finished almost in a whisper. The Foundling was stunned. Her new factotum? Why did that leave him with the lamplighters? Dr. Verhoeven gave a slight bow. As it shall be, ma'am. Take your ease. Your draughts shall be ready presently. He raised his arms in a broad gesture to the Skold and the Foundling. Come, Salo, young sir. Off to the kitchens now and do your duty. Gretel will show you the way. Tell Closet that I have sent you. With a small bright limb in her hand, the bower maid opened the door and curtsied to them, giving a grin. I'll take you to the kitchens, just as a physic ordered. She stepped lightly into the hall, and the Skold went with her. Rossamünd gave Europe a last look, and followed, a welcome calm settling inside. Things were going to turn out well. Still, his thinking turned upon 2 questions as he followed the bower maid and the Skold down the dim hall. How am I going to be Europe's factotum and a lamplighter too? And where are my shoes? Gretel took them through a door, down another passage, and through another door. Stepping alongside Salo, Rossamünd became aware that she was surrounded with some very unpleasant smells and sensations. In combination with the treacle box, these made him feel distinctly queasy. Hello, the Skold said. Hello, the Skold said softly with a shy smile. My name is Salo Mirmo. What's yours? Rossamünd, he replied. She must be of some kind of importance to have two names. As always, he was half waiting for a strange reaction to his own. My, Rossamünd. Must be amazing to be the factotum of the Brandon Rose. She had not reacted. He liked her. Pity she smells so badly. It must be amazing to be a Skold, he returned. Oh, I wish it were. Salu sounded deeply troubled. Rossamünd looked up at her sad face. I only just got back from the rhombus in Worms a month ago. She went on rapidly. 3 years I was there, learning the elements and the sub-elements, the parts, potential nostrum, all the scripts, all the bases and the combinations, the Cornish flector, the four spheres, and the four humors, applications of the vodka chemica, matter and ballistics. Oh my, what a lot to know. Rossamünd knew from his almanac that a rhombus was where some Skolds went to learn their craft. As to the other things she had said, he had no idea what she was talking about, except that matter was the study of things now past, and that ballistics was the study of how things work, and that the Vod Chemica was an ancient book, as Crampon had told him, full of the most unspeakable things. This girl seemed too polite and kind to have spent 3 years delving into such a grim volume. I have learned it all too, she carried on. Everything. Achieved high standards. Won prizes. Oh, but now... She trailed off as they went through one last door and came into a very large room full of heat and steam and shouts. Shadows moved within this muggy air, lit glaringly from behind by a large pall of flickering orange. Delicious smells, sweet and savory, hung thickly. The kitchen. Rossamünd's stomach celebrated the discovery with a gurgle. Bucket, you little sprig, a refined but gravelly voice boomed. Keep that spit turning and turning slowly, or I'll put you on it and baste you instead. There was a clang and a crash and then a tinkle. That's it! Out! Out! The voice boomed more loudly. A small child scurried out the thick vapors, pushed past them roughly and through the door. A ladle came flying after him, just missing Gretel and bouncing to the cobbled ground with a bang and a clatter that stung the ears. An average-looking man with a red face appeared from the steam. His expression changed from fit of fury to shamed apology, and finally fixing on stiff reserve as he saw the 3 newcomers, and at their feet the still shuddering ladle. Gretel, whom you brought me. Do they not like their food? Do they want Uda to make it instead, do they? He was neither short nor tall, fat nor thin, handsome nor ugly, just very average. He wore an apron of the cleanest white despite all the bubblings and boilings going on around them. It was his voice that had bellowed before. Not at all, Mr. Closet, Gretel answered merrily. You recognize young Sallow, our Skold, don't you? Little Sallow went off to Worms, has come back a proper young lady and a boggle fighter too. She needs to brew a potive here or some such under Dr. Verhoeven's orders. Mr. Closet made no sign of recognition. Instead, he looked ceilingward impatiently. Well, if the good doctor has ordered it, I suppose it must be allowed. He frowned at Sallow and pointed to his left, his hand clutching a jagged knife. "Use the hot plate in yon corner there, and stay out of the way." Gretel went to leave and saw that Rossamünd was padding about the place in just his shoes. "I'm so sorry. You hadn't had your shoes returned." "Sit, the rascal has taken his time. I will fetch them for you," she said, and left them with a smile. A silent, portly lady in an apron as filthy as closets was white, gave the Skold a small clay pot to mix in. Rossamünd fidgeted. The uncomfortable sensations coming from the treacle box were beginning to become unbearable. It was a great relief when Sallow took it from him. As he gave it to her, he asked, Miss Skold, Sallow, doesn't it make you feel nervous to hold all those reagents?" No, not really. This is a well laid out box. Very handy. And do you know where she got it from?" No. With great concentration, Sallow busied herself in the preparation of the treacle. The Skold went through all the steps just as Rossamünd had done, muttering to herself all the time. "First the Bezoriac, then the Ratane, then..." When it was finished, and Rossamünd thought it a little too lumpy, Sallow poured the treacle into a beer tankard and carried it back to the room. Europe drank as greedily as she always did. Almost before their very eyes, her face flushed with renewed vigor. As she finished the last of the treacle, Dr. Verhoeven turned to Sallow. "I have good tidings for you, my dear." The physician smiled at the Skold. "You see, Miss Fair Fulgar has told me, while you were brewing, that she has slain those troublesome buggles in the Brindleshaws." Sallow looked as if she had just been freed from a terrible jail sentence. "Really? Oh, really?" She turned from the beaming doctor to the impassive Fulgar. Rope smiled in a cool, regal way and nodded. "I hear from the physic that you were doomed to fight them yourself, girl. I'm glad to rid you of the burden. The big fellow was a doddle, but those I believe to be his little masters gave me the hardest time. The Mercantile League of High Vesting hired me to do it, so you can thank the signal stars the unhappy task is done. Back to brewing and books for you. Oh my, what a relief," was all that the overjoyed Sallow could manage for the moment. The offhand mention of the death of the misbegotten Shrew gave Rossamünd a sharp jab in his gut. The sorrow of it returned to him. Europe lay back, closing her eyes. "I won't need your sporific, Dr. Verhoeven. I feel sleep coming to me anyway." "Good to hear, just as it should be." Taking up a candle, the physician shepherded Sallow toward the door with an upraised arm. "Time for we less sleepy folk to leave. I must return to my own abode. Things there also need attending to. Sallow, after you." He smiled at Rossamünd. "When you are done here, my boy, I recommend you to the common room and get yourself a hearty meal." The Foundling nodded. "Aye, doctor, I shall." "Good night, madam." The physician bowed gracefully to Europe. "I expect you to be in much better spirits tomorrow." "And good night to you too, good doctor," returned Europe with equal grace. "Sleep well." The physician and the Skold left. Feeling a little awkward at being alone with the Fulgar, Rossamünd fidgeted and looked at her shyly. She still held the tankard in which her treacle had been served. "I could take that back to the kitchens for you, Miss Europe," he offered. She looked at him sleepily. "That's a servant's job, little man." She held it up to him anyway. "But if you must..." Excuse me. As he took it from her, He saw that there was a whole battery of marks running down the inside of each wrist, a tiny X flaring at each end. With the same deep, dry blood color as the leering monster's head drawn on Master Franztart's arm. He hesitated. Miss Europe? Yes. What are they? He asked, looking meaningfully at her wrist. The full guard turned them about to show the small marks more clearly. Arranged 4 by 4 in distinct sets. On the right wrist were 3 complete sets. 3 complete sets went halfway up her arm. On the left, there was only 1 complete set and another well on the way. Rossamünd did a quick calculation. There must be more than 70. These, she queried mildly, these are just my Cruorpunctus. Cruorpunctus? That's how it's pronounced? Your what, miss? Okay, there it is. Cruorpunctus. She repeated, growing slightly impatient. Cruorpunctus. Monster blood tattoos. Each on a mark a monster I've slain. She's killed more than 70 monsters. Not everyone is here, though. She sighed, looking intently at her forearm. Sometimes it's impossible to get at the beast after it's done, like that big brute at the bridge. He was glad she would not be able to mark the misbegotten shrew there. I thought they were always drawn in the shape of those you killed. Oh, well, that's the way of rude and vulgar fellows. I prefer something a little more comely and suitable. Rossamünd frowned. He did not like Master Franztart being called a rude, vulgar fellow. Europe roused herself. Listen now, she said, heedless of his inner fuming. While you were in the kitchens, I made an arrangement for the retrieval of dearly curious, and the landlet too. I expect it to be done by tomorrow evening. Please come and tell me as soon as it is. Yes, you're blasted, wicked, licurious, went Rossamünd's thoughts. Aye, Miss Europe, went his mouth. Rossamünd did not look at Europe as he walked to the door. All the bad he had witnessed her do was a heavy black pall in his thoughts. Just inside the door, he spied his shoes, thoroughly clean and shining black. Over them, Europe's high, violent-looking equitier boots loomed. Rossamünd took his shoes out from under the shadow and put them on. Without a word or a backward look, he left the room. This one was a bit shorter, but I suppose it was more of a intermissionary chapter where the characters are just resting. Maybe a little bit of lore dropped, but other than that, quite a satisfying little chapter. I enjoyed it. And if you enjoyed it as well, feel free to leave a like and a comment down below your thoughts and opinions on this story. And also, make sure to share the video around. If you yourself do not like it, perhaps you might know someone who is intrigued by the fantasy of this intriguing world and might enjoy reading alongside me. Also, make sure to subscribe to the channel and ring the notification bell as well. Every interaction, subscriber, and follower over on Twitch for Darkus brings all of us here one step closer to doing this full time, where we don't have to work around Darkus's job. In the meantime, I will see you all in the next chapter. I am Gresham's at all, and I do hope you have a pleasant day.